Welcome to this week's speaker tip. I'm continuing my series on how to put humor in your speeches. And today there's a concept I want to share with you, which I call stating the obvious. A lot of times the obvious is extremely funny because it's sitting there and we're looking at it all the time, but we never see how ironic it is. And a lot of comedians do this in their comedic routines. I was just watching some Jerry Seinfeld, and Jerry Seinfeld did a whole routine. Once he'd ended his show and he came back, he had a whole routine about how people ask him what he's been doing. He goes, "I've been doing nothing." And he goes, it's really hard to do nothing. And he gets into this whole thing. He goes, as soon as you start thinking about maybe doing anything, you're going to wind up doing something, and then it's going to cut into your nothing. And he does this whole routine just on how hard it is to do nothing, where most people are thinking, gosh, I really wish I could just didn't have anything to do. And they realize they're always doing something. Okay, so there's an opportunity for humor there. But the whole idea of just stating what is obvious many times can get you a good laugh. And I've got a couple examples I want to show you. What's happened to me a couple times too is I will state something that's obvious and I won't think it's going to be funny, but I get a great response from the audience. And I give an example of that for you, as well as just some other opportunities to state some obvious things in life that bring out humor. So I went through and I pulled up some of the other world champions off of my World Champion Speakers Summit. So the first person we're going to take a look at right now is the opening of Ed Tate's speech, who's the 2000 World Champion winner. And this is the opening of a speech, and he states something extremely obvious in it. So let's take a look at that.
There you go, Mr. Tate. Next time, drive a little slower. Speaking of slow, have you ever wondered why it takes a police officer so long to write a ticket? Completely eliminating all that time that you have made up.
Okay, just a simple example. How long does it take a police officer to write a ticket? When you get stopped, you lose all the time that you gain. That's something, if you've ever been stopped by a policeman, it's something we've all experienced. Great opportunity to state the obvious as some humor. Now, the next world champion I have is 2002 world champion, Dwayne Smith. And Dwayne is sharing a story about a friend of his who was going to commit suicide, and he's listening to the radio. And he makes a very obvious statement, which gets a good laugh.
To learn that tune, and he almost smiled. When the commercial ended, the next song was one that reminded him of the time that he and his ex-wife were so in love. And as he began to reminisce about the good old days, he began to feel good inside. But he quickly turned the radio off, quick. Because as he told me later on, when you're about to commit suicide, the last thing you want to do is feel good.
Okay, another great example. If you're going to commit suicide, the last thing you want to do is feel good. Stating the obvious is what we're actually looking at there. Now I'm going to show you a section from my world champion speech. And this is right close to the end. And there's two statements I have in here. The first one where I get probably the biggest response I got from the entire audience is when I'm telling them about, what's wrong with you? And we answer that, which is the obvious, okay? But what happens immediately after that, I want you to watch this, is I make another statement and I don't expect to get a laugh, but I wind up hearing a laugh developing in the audience, and I paused to see what was going to happen. And I'd never gotten a laugh at this point where I state the second obvious point. So let's watch this.
And then I figured it out. You know what's wrong with the world? You know what's wrong with me? Do you know what's wrong with you? Who cares? The question is, what is right with the world? What is right with me? What is right with you? The common denominator of all humanity is the fact that we are human. We are by nature imperfect. It takes no special talent to find an imperfection in another person.
Okay, so as you saw there, the first laugh I got on that was, you know what's wrong with me? You know what's wrong with the world? You know what's wrong with you? And I go, who cares? Which is an obvious thing, because really, who cares what's wrong with us? The question is, what's right with us? But I never gotten a laugh on, it takes no special skill or talent to find an imperfection in another person. But that is stating the obvious. And as you know, there's a lot of people that run around and they think they're so smart because I know what's wrong with you. I know what your problem is. And really, they're sort of these nitpicky, mole-like individuals that want to try to claw you down to their level. And it doesn't take any special skill or talent to find what's wrong with somebody. We all got tons of things wrong with us. So it was just stating the obvious. So this is a great tool you can use to find places to put humor into your speech. Now you'll notice on each of these applications of humor, the timing and the emphasis has a lot to do with getting the laugh. That was the first tip I had, which timing and emphasis alone can give you a laugh where you would never get a laugh before. So if you're going to state the obvious, you also have to make sure that your timing, your emphasis, your intention is in on that so you're making enough of a point. And like with Dwayne Smith, because as my friend said, when you're getting ready to commit suicide, the last thing you want to do is feel good. Okay, a little pause there. And he's saying it with a certain amount of intention. Same thing with Ed and with his, do you ever notice how slow a policeman writes out the ticket? He had timing and emphasis in what he was saying there. But the point is, state the obvious, and many times the obvious can get you a great laugh. Okay, that's this week's tip. Hope you apply it. And once again, hope these things help you in your speaking to become the speaker you want to be. I will see you next week.